The saga has finally ended, and the Toronto Blue Jays have traded Santiago Espinal to the Cincinnati Reds. It's not a big name in return for the Blue Jays, but this opens up a roster spot, and it is huge for the Toronto Blue Jays going forward. So I'll break that down and much more coming up next. What's up, Jays fans? I'm your host, Peter Vroynis, alongside host Nick Gosse. And double upload today in lieu of this move that the Toronto Blue Jays just made. They've shipped off Santiago Espinal to the Cincinnati Reds. And this was a big talking point in spring training, Nick. Where was Espinal going to land? Where was he going to end up in terms of playing time? Was he going to get any playing time? Is he going to occupy a roster spot from someone who could contribute a little bit more than he can? I mean, those were the big burning questions, at least in the past week here. And the discourse around like Twitter and just Blue Jay fans were, oh no, Espinal cannot make this team over guys like Ernie Clement or Nathan Lucas or Daniel Vogelbach or Joey Votto. Like, there are a lot of guys ahead of him in terms of just performance overall in spring training, and he hasn't really been seeing the field much as of late. So I think this was like writing on the wall here for the Blue Jays, and they finally got a deal done, and this frees up a roster spot for someone that's going to be a much more valuable contributor this year.
Yeah, and this is just the initial reaction. I'm sure I'll have a video tomorrow discussing the actual impact this move has for the other players. Before we do, a quick reminder to hit the subscribe button. We're very close to 12,000. But Peter just dropped a bit of a late upload, or you're not in your normal setup, and you're ready, though. You got on it, and here it is. Santiago Espinal is sent to the Reds, which is kind of what we predicted a few times throughout the offseason, but not for the return necessarily that we necessarily thought, but it was Chris McElvain, and he's a 23-year-old starter. He pitched in high A last season, and I got his stats and things like that, and he's not really going to be a huge impact player, at least right now or for the next little bit. He is 23, and he has some okay stats here. If you look at him, Peter, again, he hasn't pitched too much, but I'm not too worried about the return right now. I'm more focused on the immediate impact that this has on players like Ernie Clement, potentially Davis Schneider, and he will not be making the Blue Jays. The team ships him off to the Reds for the prospect pitcher. Are you happy with the return? Again, I'm not as worried about it. He didn't have too much value, clearly, as we only got a pitcher. He is still a very intriguing prospect. As John Morosi said, he had a 1.31 whip across 2 Reds affiliates, but he's not an elite, really, a guy that you're getting for Espinal, who was a former All-Star.
No, let's damper those expectations. 1.3 whip is not good at any level, and it's not good at high A either. So if you're 23 and you're in high A, chances are you're probably not going to be a big leaguer. Maybe you could be a late bloomer. I hope I'm wrong, and maybe we get someone that does contribute in the near future for the Blue Jays. But I wouldn't hold my breath if I'm a Jays fan in terms of McElvain or whatever. Is it McElvain? I don't want to disrespect him. He's still a professional baseball player. I'm not going to disrespect him. So Chris McElvain, let's hope he can turn into something. But like you, Nick, I'm really solely focused on the immediate impact that this has on the Toronto Blue Jays. And what it does do for them is that it frees up a 40-man roster spot. I doubt McElvain was on the Reds 40-man. He probably isn't, and that's why the Blue Jays made this move. And they're able to give that roster spot to Ernie Clement, who continues to tear the cover off the ball in spring training. They're able to explore Davis Schneider as a super utility guy, a guy who has more power upside than Santiago Espinal. They could give that roster spot to Daniel Vogelbach. They're not tied down by Santiago Espinal anymore, and he did some great things in a Blue Jay uniform. I'll never forget him stepping up in 2021 when the Jays didn't have a third baseman, and he was their everyday guy over there, and he was giving them some great innings. He was playing great defense at third base. He was making contact, and he was just turning that lineup over to the big guns. Like, I'll never forget the impact that he had on this team. But lately, he just hasn't been cutting it defensively and offensively. So having a guy like Ernie Clement on your roster as opposed to Santiago Espinal, I just think it gives you that added boost if you're the Blue Jays. And this was the right move to make. It doesn't matter what their return was. I was ready to DFA him if I was the Blue Jays front office. I was at that point.
Well, he did have an option, and that's kind of an interesting thing is that they didn't use that option. They'd rather just get rid of him. Which you look at his stats there. I mean, Peter, you said it. Obviously, his 2021 was more impressive than his 2022 for me, just as a whole. Obviously, he played less games, but he was a much better hitter. He was the All-Star in 2022. Kind of fell off in the second half, and again, give him his credit. He was a great clubhouse guy. Vladdy, all those guys loved him. It seemed like he was a big part of the team. But, I mean, the writing was on the wall here. Now when you're looking at we saw today, Ernie Clement's been tearing up the entire spring training. He got on base for Vladimir Guerrero Jr. to hit a 2-run moonshot. Like, Ernie Clement, for one, he's out of options. For two, he's not really, he would get a spot elsewhere if he was DFA'd. Ernie Clement 100% with the way that he's shown his ability to hit at the major league level and at the minor league level since coming over to the Blue Jays. And quite frankly, he gives them a better chance to win right now. And it's good asset management by the Blue Jays to get something for him, because the alternative was you option him to AAA and then maybe he gets DFA'd down the line. And I wonder how much of this has to do with maybe Espinal doesn't want to be DFA'd because he still is an MLB caliber player, especially maybe on a team like the Reds. So maybe they were doing good by Santiago Espinal by trading him off instead of optioning him to AAA.
Yeah, maybe. But at the same time, if you do send him down, and because he has options, that 40-man roster spot is still occupied. So how are you going to make room for Joey Votto, for Daniel Vogelbach? Let's say Eduardo Escobar makes the team somehow. How are you going to make room for those guys? That was a big question mark that the Blue Jays had to get answered, and they did it today. I mean, they have that roster spot freed up right now for guys that have been really performing well. And it's not a big deal who the last man on your roster is, and that was probably going to be Espinal, the way that he's been playing lately and just the past 2 years. So I'm not going to say that Ernie Clement is going to be a game changer for this Blue Jay team, or he's going to be an everyday player. But I think when he does get in the lineup, or if someone does go down with an injury, his ceiling is a little bit higher. He's a better base runner. I think he can play more positions. He could play outfield. He made a nice play in left field today, a diving stab, and I mean, he can do a bit more than what Espinal can. He's got a bit more extra base power as well. So I just look at this move as a whole. I'm not going to hold my breath on the return. I'm not going to say that Espinal won't be a valuable contributor somewhere else, but you don't want to let go of a guy like Ernie Clement, because I mentioned it in the previous video, Nick. He's the type of guy to get DFA'd, sign on to a one-year deal with the Oakland A's, and he's going to be an all-star, because every team has to have an all-star. So I don't want that to happen. I think he can contribute on this Blue Jay team, and Espinal's time just ran its course, unfortunately.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, given how good he was at one point for the past couple of years, it would have been nice to get a bit more of a notable return. But I think at this point, I mean, their hand was forced, and ultimately, it's more about, like exactly what you mentioned, not the return of the pitcher you're seeing on your screen now, but more so about getting Ernie Clement a spot without having to move too many things around and without limiting some potential other players like David Schneider. Maybe they believe that they want to keep him on the bench. Like, keeping Espinal would have handcuffed your team for no real reason besides maybe if you could bring back some of the magic he had. And like, there's no point of even thinking about that at this point, because we saw throughout a whole season last year. And even now, this is not the hit on Espinal. He still was a very good player. His defense declined last year as well, Peter, and we all saw it every single day. And I think it's beneficial for both sides that there was a change of scenery. So, any final thoughts? We'll probably have more in depth tomorrow, depending on what other moves they make. But interesting initial reaction. Not a crazy return, but I'm happy that Ernie Clement supposedly got the job.
Yeah, you want to see Espinal do well. Like, he was a professional throughout his entire time here in Toronto. Didn't complain about his playing time. Didn't make a fuss about it in the media. So I wish him all the best. But the writing was on the wall when the Blue Jays went out and signed Isaiah Kiner-Falefa. That's the way I looked at it, because they're similar players. And IKF is a better defender. He could play more positions. He's a much better base runner as well. Similar output with the bat, although IKF has been pretty good this spring, and hopefully it translates into the regular season. But I think once the Blue Jays signed IKF and gave him all that money over the course of 2 years, that was it for Espinal. And he really had to come out guns blazing in spring training, and he didn't do that. So now guys like Ernie Clement, David Schneider, and to a certain degree, I don't know, Spencer Horwitz have outlasted him in a sense. So I don't think there was a place for him on this roster. I'm glad the Blue Jays realized that before it was too late. And I'm looking forward to seeing what Ernie Clement can do in a full big league season. I think he can be a valuable contributor.
Yeah, a lot of fans, I think, out there will be happy, Peter. But that'll wrap it up. Let us know what your thoughts are on this. A bit of a later upload. Literally just dropped about 10 minutes ago as of the time of recording. And yeah, that'll wrap it up. Thank you guys for watching. We'll see. If you want to check out our video from earlier today, click on your screen now, and we'll see you tomorrow.